Tim Robinson's style of humor is often referred to as absurd. His character's extreme mood swings and lack of social awareness, within the framework of unusual scenarios, are the platonic ideal of cringe comedy. The Netflix sketch comedy series I Think You Should Leave with Tim Robinson presents viewers with both ordinary and outlandish scenarios, both made uncomfortable by at least one central character who just doesn't get it.
Slurping down fish piss with these wet chodes. Put a bullet in their fish king brains and leave their wet bodies on the side of the road.
Or gets it too much.
We have a rule that basically says if two people order nachos to share, one person can't take the ones with meat and stuff.
Robinson drops us unprepared into a scenario where a professor tries every workaround to get a bite of his student's burger instead of just asking, or a party guest accuses the birthday boy of not washing his hands after eating his gift receipt, or a bandmate ruins the lead singer's star moment by improvising a song about cannibal skeletons, or a driver who sees a honk if you're horny bumper sticker follows the car and keeps honking because there were no further instructions and he really is horny. While I Think You Should Leave has been called both absurdist and surrealist, the majority of its sketches aren't off-the-wall surrealist in the vein of something like Smiling Friends, or even a live-action meta-comedy like Community. You have your occasional ghosts of Christmas way future and motorcycle-based aliens, but for the most part, the absurdism of I Think You Should Leave comes from characters acting in an antisocial manner, more extreme than a toned-down cringe comedy like The Office, but not so extreme that there isn't a small chance any one of us could run into these situations. For instance, Robinson may play a guest on a ghost tour who ruins the fun for everyone by randomly inserting disgusting sexual phrases into the conversation. The tour guide had established that they were allowed to use adult language since this is the adults-only tour, so Robinson's character is genuinely confused when the tour guide reacts harshly to his questions about horsecocks and donkey dicks. Given the setting, the writers could have easily stuck in a shock ending joke involving a ghost, maybe a ghost with the same sexual non-sequitur sense of humor, but instead the sketch ends with Tim being kicked out of the haunted house by the other tourists, still not understanding why they're so mad at him for doing something he was explicitly told he was allowed to do. Discouraged and confused, he gets picked up by his mother and sadly tells her he didn't make any friends tonight. The ghost tour sketch isn't the only scene in I Think You Should Leave that makes the viewer feel for its unaware protagonist. In one skit, Patty Harrison's character latches onto someone else's joke and keeps repeating it with slight variations, not understanding why no one thinks it's funny even though they laughed the first time. Like the guy on the ghost tour, she seems to think social interactions can be boiled down to a mathematical formula. If X is funny, and Y is funny, then X plus Y times 100 must be really funny. This sketch ends with the protagonist feeling validated when her boss laughs at her dead horse of a joke. The viewer, who may be equally unaware but understands Patty's mistake through framing, can assume she doesn't realize the significance of her boss not having heard it the first 100 times. The reason the ghost tour sketch stands out, aside from being the reason me and my siblings use the phrase horsecock and donkey dick in everyday conversation, is that the downer ending hammers home the fact that this guy didn't mean to be obnoxious or to make things awkward. He wasn't even trying to be funny, he just figured that he might as well exercise his right to use adult language, and we know he wouldn't have talked that way in a family-friendly environment. I can safely say I have enough restraint not to ask a tour guide if any of the ghosts ever fucking fall out of the ceiling and have like a big messy shit. But I lie awake at night haunted by the memories of times when I've killed a conversation with a well-intentioned joke that either made everyone think I was an asshole or made everyone else think I thought they were assholes. A few select I Think You Should Leave sketches portray this type of regret. The awkward characters don't know they're being offensive, but they know everyone is suddenly treating them like a pariah, and they double down on their behavior to try covering, which can lead to scenes of emotional dejection that leave the viewer feeling bad for laughing.
Through the darkness, future past, the magician longs to see one chant sound between two words. Fire, walk with me.
Tim Robinson's socially absurd and interpersonally surrealist humor made its way into serialized TV in HBO's 2025 comedy thriller The Chair Company. Starring Robinson, Lake Bell, and Sophia Lillis, The Chair Company does follow a direct narrative, but from a distance, every episode is essentially a series of vignettes similar to I Think You Should Leave. From an even greater distance, the entire season could be seen as one 364-minute sketch, where we follow a character played by Tim Robinson who's so socially inept that you wonder how he managed to live such an ordinary life. There's an inciting incident that the character can't let go of and spends the rest of the story trying to justify, and the secondary characters appear socially functional compared to the lead. But like I Think You Should Leave, the supporting characters who represent social conformity as a contrast are clearly living imperfect lives, and sacrificing their individuality and beliefs in exchange for non-conflict. The waitress in the first scene of the first episode butts heads with Robinson's Ron Prosper because she's more like him than his wife and kids. Even though she's on the clock, she's willing to argue with a customer over unimportant semantics, even knowing she's insulting his life's work, because agreeing to disagree is equivalent to backing down or even lying. Ron's wife and kids would prefer that he just give in, even though social norms would dictate that the customer is always right. Ron's family are generally supportive of his life choices, but they're not about to back him up in a pointless argument against a stranger at work. The Chair Company is built on small bouts of uncomfortable social interaction, just like Curb Your Enthusiasm before it. I won't go too much into detail about Larry David and Curb, since I already talked about the philosophy of rebelling against social disingenuousness in my Curb/Camus/Kafka video. But essentially, Larry and Ron are similar in that they can't just let something go if they know they're right, even if it means alienating people around them through antisocial behavior. In fact, the entire show is basically an extended example of Ron not being able to let something go. A chair broke when he sat on it, and he's convinced that this accident needs to be justified with a massive recall of the Chair Company's entire product line, and his inability to accomplish this leads him down a path of absolutely nutty conspiracy theories. But his dogged investigation is rewarded over and over with new clues that he's actually onto something. Because unlike Curb Your Enthusiasm or The Office, the entire universe of the Chair Company is held together by absurdism, surrealism, individualism, and holistic methodology. This view of the series is only possible because it's serialized. Maybe you could say the same of I Think You Should Leave, but since every scene is a fresh new world with no connective tissue, viewers can never get a sense for any ontological through line. The Chair Company's humor may be almost identical to I Think You Should Leave.
Shut the fuck up, dog, you fucking skunk!
But its approach to storytelling and exploration of the human condition reminded me over and over of a very different show, Twin Peaks: The Return. I was actually surprised to find that a lot of reviews shared this opinion. Not comparing the Chair Company to Twin Peaks, since every TV show with a slightly surreal atmosphere is inevitably compared to Twin Peaks, but a number of reviews I read specifically compared the Chair Company to the late by 25 years third season of Twin Peaks, which any fan will tell you, compared to the original, is a whole different percolator of fish.
There was a
Fish.
in the percolator.
The original 2 seasons of Twin Peaks had their fair share of awkward social interactions and surrealist scenes that must have felt totally pointless through the lens of early 90s TV, where all things must serve the plot. You have a woman who carries around a log that she claims can speak to her.
Who's the lady with the log?
I would call it a log lady.
You have a rich lawyer who runs an underage brothel, treating his pig-shaped smoked Gouda with just as much importance as his file of incriminating documents. You have a special agent of the FBI trying to find a murderer by throwing rocks at a bottle. One of the most bizarre scenes comes when one of the characters delivers proto DoorDash and the elderly customer gets very stern about requesting no creamed corn, and her grandson uses magic to teleport the creamed corn into his hands. Of course, that scene actually had major lore implications. We don't get it all spelled out, but the prequel movie Firewalk with Me shows us that these two are somehow paranormal, and that the concentrated essence of pain and suffering appears in the human world as creamed corn. Same goes for the lady with the log. We don't know for sure what's up with the log, but she ends up being one of the sanest characters in the show, and she's so knowledgeable about the mysteries and lore that the cable reruns brought her back to introduce the themes directly to the audience. Outside of the lore, a lot of the characters in Twin Peaks don't conform to social expectations, but since so much of David Lynch's work focuses on the idea that innocent Americana is used as a mask for depravity, a lot of the more openly weird characters are actually the few who aren't hiding some harmful secret. Nadine, Lucy and Andy, Dick Tremaine, the Log Lady, and Dale Cooper himself could probably have their own sketches on I Think You Should Leave, but they're not hiding dark and sinister activities like the Palmer or Horn families, who appear inoffensive and all-American. The biggest central change to the surface-level story of the long-awaited Season 3 of Twin Peaks was that most of it wasn't set in Twin Peaks. A lot of the story is set in Las Vegas and South Dakota, and there are plot lines in New York City and Washington, D.C. Lynch's decision to keep his viewers at an arm's length from the small town they'd been waiting 25 years to see tied into the show's themes of not being able to relive the past or undo past mistakes, but it also made viewers conscious of the fact that a whole world exists outside of Twin Peaks, even within the universe of a show named after Twin Peaks. Season 3 characters who show up and do something socially inept have no chance of being developed past their initial bizarre moment because they'll never be seen again. The character who sent the cops on a wild goose chase to look for her neighbor's key, then asks if it would help to borrow the spare she had the whole time, could have been developed into a wacky but fleshed out character like the Log Lady. But since this apartment building is never seen again, this character, who I just discovered is unfortunately named Marjorie Green, is never seen again. Neither is the maintenance man, who's clearly embroiled in some kind of criminal scheme with unseen characters, which the show takes the time to point out despite this guy also being a one-time appearance. Some of these one-off characters aren't inherently funny either. There are a few characters we meet in the bar from the original show who are clearly addicted to hard drugs and have no effect on the plot, other than reminding us that we can't go back to the Twin Peaks of before, not the town and not the show. These vignettes of unknown characters aren't common on TV, even in shows that aren't totally plot-focused. Knowing what I know about David Lynch, I know better than to guess what he was going for, but I think I can say these little left-field moments in Twin Peaks serve a different purpose than, say, the scene in Mulholland Drive where an assassin we haven't met before totally botches his job and ends up shooting 3 people and a vacuum cleaner. Unusual side characters can make any fictional town feel more fleshed out, but most TV shows won't give them the chance to act realistically unusual on screen unless there's some sort of punchline, or the normal characters can offer the viewers a reassuring contrast. Twin Peaks: The Return used these one-off scenes to remind viewers that not only is this world populated by people who aren't part of the main plot, but that they have their own main plots running parallel and they're all the main characters of their own lives. This is a truth of real life that's hardly ever depicted on TV. The main characters might do something unusual, like throwing a pizza onto their roof, and any background characters might react to them publicly breaking social norms, but the viewer will give them a pass because they're the main characters and we have context. In Twin Peaks: The Return, we meet a new FBI character and watch him calmly discuss a case, but the moment his subordinate questions how to proceed, he yells,
Wilson, how many times have I told you? This is what we do in the FBI!
These characters do appear a couple more times, but there's no development to explain why this agent acts so unprofessional and has such a short temper. But we can extrapolate an entire history between him and his subordinate, a relationship that the viewer wouldn't even consider if not for the yelling. This type of uncomfortable, antisocial, and sometimes obnoxious interaction between all but unnamed characters is integral to the humor of The Chair Company. In fact, it was that scene with the FBI agents that popped into my head while I was first watching The Chair Company and made me start drawing parallels between the two shows. In The Chair Company, Ron Trosper can walk into a diner and see a bunch of people fighting in a way that's almost too aggressive to be funny, and the show won't go out of its way to explain who these people are or why they're fighting, because if Ron doesn't care, why should the viewer? If any of us were in Ron's shoes, we wouldn't stop and wonder what this fistfight has to do with the ongoing mystery, any more than Dale Cooper would wonder what this llama has to do with Laura Palmer's death. In one episode, Ron is chasing someone through an apartment building and runs into an older couple making out, while another comedy may have just had Ron drop a, awkward. This show makes us watch an extended sequence where the man holds Ron hostage, thinking his wife paid him to catch him cheating, then makes Ron kiss the woman on camera to use as blackmail. These two are never seen or mentioned again because they're often their own black comedy love triangle show, and Ron was just a quirky one-off character to them, just like they were to him. Details in both Twin Peaks and The Chair Company, like Jerry's Cheese Pig or Mike's Chocolate King Kong, could be interpreted as the writers just choosing a Mad Libs of objects and situations that could accentuate the scene, essentially choosing elements for the show completely at random. But everything that comes off as pointlessly unusual really just highlights that none of these characters are treated as inherently lesser just because they appear less frequently. Mike even explains that he's been seeing that chocolate King Kong for a year and looking for an excuse to buy it. If Mike were the POV character, that could have easily been a motif illustrating his desire to take control of his own life, like that Neon Genesis Evangelion action figure from 1 Hour Photo. By the penultimate episode of The Chair Company, the central mystery has become convoluted and stalled by side plots, similar to David Lynch's original plan for Laura Palmer's murder investigation to create so many branching storylines that they wouldn't have to actually ID her killer until the end of the show, if ever. As it is now, I could believe that any future seasons of The Chair Company won't give us any answers to the whole Tekka debacle. And by that, I mean they give us so many answers and so many new mysteries that the viewer realizes, even if they consciously deny it, that it's about the journey, not the destination. Game of Thrones also started as a murder mystery, but by the time we found out that Jon Arryn was killed by Lysa and Littlefinger, we'd gotten so involved in the branching storylines that we hardly even cared anymore. Ironically, this is exactly why Fire Walk With Me was originally hated by fans. They had gotten so invested in the side characters and side stories that the death of Laura Palmer no longer interested them, especially since Lynch was forced to reveal the killer in season 2. Twin Peaks: The Return went in the opposite direction, dedicating at least a little part of every episode to brand new one-off characters who were even quirkier than in the original show, while not having as well-defined a central mystery as Laura's death. What even is the main story of season 3? Something about Major Briggs's body, Cooper's odyssey back to himself, a few choice scenes involving Laura Palmer, and Mr. C's plot to find David Bowie in a giant tea kettle. Likewise, The Chair Company's central plotline is obscured by its side stories and characters. What originally seemed like a mystery about a chair manufacturer engaging in white-collar crime became a branching tree of mysteries and character development. In fact, the central mystery seems to be solved in the penultimate episode. It may continue in season 2, but as far as we know, all the answers came together to form a complete picture, which was then added onto in the final episode as Ron discovers a tangential but seemingly deeper mystery. The finale of The Chair Company seems to be protecting itself from repeating the failure of Twin Peaks Season 2, that being not replacing the murder mystery with another central premise, at least not until they brought in the most cartoonishly evil Disney villain and started trying to explain away the paranormal aspect. The question of who killed Laura Palmer was the tree off which all the other characters and plotlines of Twin Peaks branched. When the killer was revealed, that tree was chopped down and the branches were left floating, disconnected in air. Tim Robinson's decision to solve the mystery in the penultimate episode, then tease greater mysteries to come in the finale, is more like a second tree growing out of the first, complete with its own branches. Continuing that analogy, Twin Peaks: The Return actually began with disconnected branches. There were a few major plot lines, mainly involving the FBI and Evil Cooper, but the side stories and side characters didn't always branch off of these. Sure, the new drug addict character was connected through being married to the daughter of two characters from the old show, but at the same time you had the woman in the house across the street from Dougie Jones shooting up and yelling 911 backwards, never affecting the other characters. David Lynch welcomed us back to the universe of Twin Peaks, but the setting and the disconnected storylines reminded us that this is a fractured world, not the wholesome and whole environment of the original. The title Twin Peaks: The Return is completely ironic, and if Lynch was being honest, he would have taken a page out of Evangelion's book and called it Twin Peaks: You Cannot Return. Probably the most unsettling one-off character in The Chair Company appears in the final episode when Ron follows his new dog to a house in the woods, revealed to be the home she recently escaped from. The dog's previous owner shows Ron his pet project, a holographic projection of a geometrical form he claims has never been seen before. Even ignoring his Bilbo Baggins jump scare, this character acts antisocial and borderline threatening, even while inviting Ron into his home. This isn't the silly, awkward behavior of I Think You Should Leave, but something closer to the one-off characters in Twin Peaks: The Return. We even find out later that this guy has been actively abusing the dog that Ron just returned to him, and apparently has a social media following dedicated to freeing her. But when Ron sadly asks the man to post a picture of him to Instagram to thank him for finding his dog, Ron becomes the weird one-off character. Couldn't you imagine a sketch from I Think You Should Leave where a weird guy returns a dog to a normal guy and gets weirdly obsessive about wanting a thank you Insta post? You might say that this dog-abusing shape inventor is objectively less normal than Ron, but surely it doesn't feel that way to him, right? He's involved in his own story, possibly a sci-fi fantasy story, just like that woman in The Return who's desperate to get to dinner on time regardless of the gunfire or the zombie girl riding shotgun. This guy could be a serial killer mad scientist, and his decision not to kill Ron could have been a major moment of emotional development for him. We'll never know, but the Instagram thank you appearing after the man's only scene was a little hint of connective thread between these two parallel storylines, one of which we're following, and one of which we only see for as long as it takes an FBI agent to yell at his subordinate. Because while we could have followed the dog owner, or the manic lady in the car, or the coke addict with the dent in his head, or the loudmouthed FBI agent, or the ghost tour guide, or the handyman who's clearly selling drugs, the narrative of the chair company has selected Ron Trosper as the middle ground between normal and completely erratic lifestyles. When Ron leaves a scene, the one-off characters cease to exist as we, the viewer, follow him out, accepting the advice Netflix has been suggesting since 2019. I think you should leave with Tim Robinson.